I kind of came to fantasy late. I was more of like the urban fantasy fan back in early 2010s. It was very popular. And that was kind of more my jam. I wasn't growing up reading Tolkien or anything. So in 2018, I kind of went through a personal crisis where I needed a different sort of escape and fell into um, fantasy, romantic fantasy. And there were three series that made me fall in love with the Fae and just become obsessed. So, most popular is probably ACOTAR, Sarah J. Maas's Court of Thorns and Roses. Loved that. Then Karen Marie Moning has a series that was probably more in the urban fantasy era, actually, when it began, and it's called the Fever series. And she has, it's more of like a modern world, and the Fae come here from their realm. Um, and it's incredible and, like your top tier morally gray hero. And then my absolute favorite is Holly Black. Now she has the Cruel Prince series, which is probably the most popular of her Fae series, but she has been writing Fae for forever, like since way before book talk, right? She's just, I think that she's the go-to for me for how to write Fae. And the reason is a true fairy, if you and I were to stumble across one today, they are so clever and so smart. And that is how they're going to get you. Like, that is how they're going to get you before their like great magic really does. And Holly writes the cleverness of the Fae better than anyone else. I didn't even try. I was like, I love what she did. I don't think I can. Like, she must be so, so clever herself to be able to pull that off. So I didn't lean into that as much as you'd think I would, given how much I absolutely adore it about all of her Fae. They're just chef's kiss. So I just like fell in love with this new mythical creature and found myself imagining a world that was a little more troubled than ours. And these people in it knowing that like they live adjacent to this realm of the Fae and knowing that no matter how evil the people in their world might be, at least they aren't the Fae, at least they aren't the unseelie. Um, and like that classical tradition, if you have the Seelie and the unseelie, which some will tell you are the good Fae and the bad Fae, and other people will tell you there's no such thing as good Fae, there's just bad Fae and worse Fae, right? And of course, anytime a group of people or even an individual is defined as anything, I want to play with that, right? Like I have quite a few books in my backlist where I play with the idea of what happens when someone goes through their formative years being labeled as a slut. And I know that sounds very different than like YA Fae, but it's that idea of what happens when you label someone. What happens when someone's been told, the world is told that they are this. You are bad Fae. You are the evil kind. So I was always fascinated with that dichotomy of the Seelie and the Unseelie. And I wanted to dive into it. So in my mind, they were competing kingdoms, and the best way we could tell the story was by putting an outsider into those kingdoms. And what better than a thief that's there to steal something and has everything on the line because she's trying to get her sister back. Bree first came to my mind as this angry servant scrubbing floors. This changed before we got to the book, but the first time I saw her, she's scrubbing the floors and staring at her boss's safe that she knows how much money is in it. And just trying to decide, is it worth it? So she lives in a world where there are these terribly unfair contracts that she and her sister have found themselves in and can't get out of. And as a result, she ends up falling deeper and deeper into debt. And her sister is sold to the wicked Fae King um, without, any choice in the matter as a means to pay off that debt. And so she makes a deal with the king that she will go and she will pose as a potential bride for the Seelie prince in order to be able to infiltrate his kingdom and steal these very important relics for the king, for the Unseelie king. And so she poses as a potential bride, is able to get in there, finds out some surprising things about the Seelie prince, and then ends up along the way teaming up with the exiled Unseelie prince, who has an agenda of his own. And he's got his whole ragtag team of misfits, and uh, it's a good time. I really had fun with one, these characters don't all have to look human. You know, it's fun to be able to, if you listen to Holly Black's fans, one of their biggest complaints is that one of their favorite male love interests has a tail. And I didn't give anybody a tail, but I love how unapologetic she is. She's like, he's Faye. So being able to have this supporting cast that, you know, a couple of them have some horns and red eyes and just like really playing with the the visual, you know, different and otherness of everything. And of course, I love a good love triangle. So it was a lot of fun to set up the Unseelie prince, the bad prince, the bad Fae, against the Seelie prince, who's supposed to be the good Fae. And I had a lot of fun working with them as contrasts to each other, which I do a lot in my next series in this world too. Just trying to use two key characters, kind of almost as foils of each other, not quite, so that we maybe notice things about them because of the way the other one is. I ended on a big cliffhanger because I do love a cliffhanger. So it was fun to go dive right in. Like I dove straight from where we left off at these Hollow Vows into book two, because while Bree, you know, fulfilled her mission, she wrapped up her journey. Her journey was really just beginning. And now suddenly she's in a very different position with some very different powers at her fingertips, and learning to navigate those and and her new world from a very different position, and trying to figure out, like, in this world where initially she comes in and she's like, I can trust no one, right? This is very, no one can be trusted. I'm on my own, I'm alone. And she slowly had to learn to trust select people. And that ended up being her biggest mistake. And yet she can't get anywhere. She can't make sure that she and her sister are safe for the future, if she doesn't trust people again. So she's kind of got to go through that all over again. Beneath These Cursed Stars is a new duology set in the same world as these Hollow Vows. It's 3 years later, and this duology looks at Jaslyn, who was a prisoner and off the page for most of these Hollow Vows duology. And now we have a chance to go back and look at what happens when scars we thought were long healed are actually coming back to the surface, and what happens and what lengths people are willing to go through when their trauma still has them by the throat and they're trying to do what they think they need to do to get through, which is sometimes only making the trauma worse. She has the kiss of death. She sold everything for this ring that gives her the kiss of death, and she wants to go on this journey to get revenge against the evil king who did terrible things to her. And meanwhile, Felicity, who, you know, I did set up initially as her foil, is a shifter, and so she has to pretend to be Jaslyn. So Jaslyn has the freedom to go on this mission because her sister would never. And so now Felicity is in the Wild Fae territory, pretending to be Princess Jaslyn, and Felicity has her own goal of, you know, she has this really dark, fatal fate that she's trying to avoid. But while in the princess's form. So Felicity is different than a typical shapeshifter. In my mind, a member of the Fae who can shapeshift, somebody who's paying attention would still be able to figure out that they are not who they say they are, because they still kind of maintain their own, maybe their own scent, their own sense of aura, that any like magical intuition that you might have about someone, you'd be able to figure out with, if you're paying close attention, that this is a shifter pretending to be someone they're not. Whereas the Echoes, which is the special breed of shifter that Felicity is, truly become the other person. um, everything about them becomes like the other person. And every time they take their form, they get a dream that offers them one memory of that person. So, and those memories, in theory, are going to help them be a more convincing version of that person. But their tone of voice, the way they smell, their aura in general, their presence, the way they fill a room, all of that kind of comes with the shifting for echoes, whereas it might not for a typical shifter. And of course, Jocelyn has this traumatic past that she hasn't fully shared with anyone. And Felicity is getting her memories one at a time through her dreams as each day goes by. And she is taking Jocelyn's form, and she's learning things about the princess that even the queen doesn't know. So in between these broken hearts, we're actually picking up quite a ways out from where we left off our characters and beneath these cursed stars for reasons. Uh, you might suspect if you read the first book, but I don't want to give you any spoilers. But what we have is a princess who only has 11 days left to live because of a deal she made. We have a shifter who is still on the run and trying to avoid the prophecy that could literally end the life of her brother, and trying to avoid the expectations of all of her friends who really need nothing more than for her to kill the king, kill their king. Um, it's it's a new adventure, but we're picking up with these characters' old wounds. Well, I think for me, I have always really enjoyed leaning into to traditions. I find that things that can feel overdone become also reader expectations. So it can be a careful balance, but I think for me, the key to making something not feel overdone is making sure that the character is their own person. That it's not just um, a two-dimensional king figure, insert king here, but someone with their own hopes, dreams, goals, fears, and that makes any sort of tired characteristics kind of become their own new characteristics because they're unique to that individual.